Hello, my Uber and Lyft family. How is everyone doing? One of our Uber and Lyft family member sent me this information, this news about a New York taxi driver who killed himself. She sent it to me in an email, and I looked at it, and I am like, oh my gosh. I want to say a couple things before we start listening. First, I don't believe, okay, I don't believe that there is anything on earth worth you taking your life. Even though I have tried when I was going through some hard times, financial issues, but God blessed me to survive it. And now I see life and things and bills and, all this pressure of life. I don't allow it to weigh me down. And this particular driver worked hundreds of hours within a day, within a week to make ends meet for his family. But now I'm thinking, after all you have done, now the family don't have you to help support them. He posted some information on Facebook, and I guess he felt that that was the best thing for him to do, is to kill himself. I don't know if he had a large life insurance. I'm trying to figure out what was the motive, like what was his intent, because his reason for killing himself is because of Uber and Lyft, rideshare gigs and politics and particular political individuals. Let's take a listen. Let's take a listen to this. I mean, I'm just kind of sort of like, wow. My prayers go out to the family and everyone who is affected by this situation. Okay, so let's take a listen.
Car driver who'd committed suicide outside the gates of City Hall Monday. Douglas Shifter is believed to be the third New York City driver to commit suicide in the past 3 months. In a message posted on Facebook, Shifter blames city and state leaders and ride-sharing apps like Uber for pushing him and other taxi drivers into financial despair. He wrote, quote, "I work 100 to 120 consecutive hours almost every week for the past 14 plus years. When the industry started in 1981, I averaged 40 to 50 hours. I cannot survive any longer with working 120 hours. I am not a slave, and I refuse to be one. Bloomberg, de Blasio, and Andrew Cuomo have each had their part in destroying a once thriving industry. There are over 100,000 of us suffering daily now. It is the new slavery," he wrote. He went on to say, "There seems to be a strong bias by the mayor and governor in favor of Uber, a company that is a known liar, cheat, and thief," Shifter wrote. Over the past 5 years, the number of for-hire cars has more than doubled in the city, largely thanks to Uber. But the soaring number of cars has resulted in a financial crisis for many longtime taxi drivers who now struggle to get customers. Shifter had warned about this in the pages of the publication Black Car News, where he wrote a monthly column, but his warnings were ignored. Neil Weiss, owner of Black Car News, said, quote, his life was really falling apart. He couldn't pay his house or for his car. He was doing his best to pay for what he owed. We're joined right now by Betavi Desai, who is executive director and co-founder of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, which represents over 19,000 taxi drivers in New York City. Last April, she testified before the Taxi and Limousine Commission and warned about the rising despair among drivers. Betavi Desai, welcome back to Democracy Now! This tragedy that has just occurred. Talk about what happened on Monday, who Douglas Shifter was.
Well, Douglas Shifter was a long-time, over 30-year professional black car driver in New York City, and he'd also been an activist. He was a prolific writer for the industry papers, and he went early morning in front of City Hall, and he shot himself. And before he had shot himself, he wrote a post on Facebook where, he really just outlined, I think, the reality that over 100,000 drivers, professional drivers in New York City are facing.
What is that reality?
It's a race to the bottom. Every day, people are going deeper and deeper into poverty. And this is the reality of the so-called gig economy. It's about destroying what has been a full-time profession, turning it into part-time poverty pay work. Uber and Lyft, and by the way, they're absolutely the same. It's all one same business model. They use their political might. In 2016, Uber and Lyft combined spent more on lobbying than Amazon and Walmart combined. And Microsoft as well. And so they use their political might to win deregulation bills.
They used more money on lobbying than Walmart, Microsoft,
and Amazon.
And Amazon combined.
Yes. A few years ago, Uber had 33% more lobbyists than just Walmart itself. And, Amy, the most amazing thing here is that what they're lobbying for is first exemption from existing taxi local rules and regulations. They go straight to the state level, so they are exempt from city level regulations. Once they win that deregulation, they're able to flood the streets with vehicles in order to outcompete the existing taxi industry.
And explain what those regulations they no longer have to abide by are.
So the regulations would be around, for example, vehicle requirements, the number of inspections a vehicle has to go through, the amount of mileage that a vehicle can have, as well as insurance requirements in cases of accidents, as well as, criminal background checks on drivers and the licensing process, and of course, any kind of a permit, like in New York City, it's famous for the medallion, the number you see on top of the yellow cab, which it's its own capital, and at one point here cost close to $1 million for the corporate medallion. Uber and Lyft enter into these cities with none of these expenses, and so it's obviously not a leveled playing field. But what's also important to note is, after they're able to deregulate the taxi regulations and flood the streets with vehicles, and the way they flood them with vehicles, by the way, is they use Wall Street money to lure drivers with these high bonuses. Soon as the bonuses dry up, the drivers start to plummet into poverty. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission fined Uber $25 million for false advertising over these bonuses. And then Uber and Lyft use their lobbying might to exempt themselves from existing labor laws. In 21 states, they've got an exemption that basically companies that are part of the so-called gig economy. So if the work is dispatched through an app, that these companies then, they would be exempt from any employer responsibilities. They could cut the rates as low as they want. Even if the drivers earn below minimum wage, there's no protection for the driver. There is no economic floor for the workers. And so professional drivers like Douglas are seeing their profession, just being economically crushed, and there is no alternative for them.
I wanted to go back to another excerpt of what Douglas Shifter posted on Facebook before he killed himself in front of New York City Hall on Monday. He said car companies had slashed their rates since the introduction of Uber and Lyft in the city. He wrote, quote, "Due to the huge numbers of cars available with desperate drivers trying to feed their families, they squeeze rates to below operating costs and force professionals like me out of business. They count their money and we are driven down into the streets we drive, becoming homeless and hungry. I will not be a slave working for chump change. I would rather be dead," he wrote on Facebook and then killed himself.
You know, and I've been organizing for over 20 years in the taxi industry. We were on the verge of a historic victory just a few years ago before Uber and Lyft ascended into town. I have never seen drivers in more deeper despair and crisis. You know, every day there are more vehicles that these companies put out onto the streets, and what's important to note is that it's a revolving door. Uber itself has said that more than 50% of the drivers only stay with Uber for 6 months at a time. I mean, a few years ago, right, the questions would be, are unions relevant? The question of the gig economy is, are workers relevant? And imagine, you're working 12 hours, barely making $50 for yourself, and the entire time you're hearing that automation is right around the corner. Because as far as these companies are concerned, you're earning $50 too many. So, of course, there's a sense of hopelessness, particularly, we know that the economy is not accidental. It's not an act of God. It's not a natural disaster. These are politically motivated decisions that give corporate America and these Wall Street companies advantages and allow them a free will to destroy livelihoods.
Beta V, we're talking about Douglas Shifter, but on December 20th, hours after a hearing about the Taxi and Limousine Commission's threat to take away his license, Danilo Corporan Castillo, who was 57 years old, plunged from the roof of his Harlem of a Harlem building after calling his wife in distress after the mounting fines he owed. Douglas Shifter is just the latest suicide.
That's right. This is the third. Douglas was the third suicide we know of within these just 2 to 3 months, and there is a crisis. There's a human crisis as a result of the political failures, that have given these Wall Street companies a free hand. And most of their lobbyists, by the way, come out of the Democratic Party. Many of them went straight from the Obama White House to work for Uber.
And talk about the role. In this case, we're talking about New York, but this is happening around the country. Shifter specifically talked about Bloomberg, whose family he said he had driven around, his mother and daughter. He talked about current Mayor de Blasio, and he talked about Governor Cuomo.
Yes, Governor Cuomo has really been Uber's biggest cheerleader in the state of New York. Douglas's main post talked about the saturation of vehicles. There's not enough fares. There's too many cars. Nobody can earn a living. It's a race to the bottom. A few years ago, the mayor, de Blasio, actually went to initiate a cap on the number of vehicles as to the Taxi Limousine Commission. It was the governor who intervened on behalf of Uber, and at that time said that Uber called it a startup. This was a company at that time had a $40 billion valuation, and they continued to call it a startup. So there's been a massive political failure, and it's urgent, but things can change. The city and the state can enact real change. By the way, Governor Cuomo's loyalty went as far as not only did he expedite a deregulation bill in Albany at our capital, simultaneously, when Uber drivers themselves were filing for unemployment, one of them, Jeff, had filed because even though he worked 40 to 60 hours a week, there were weeks he took home a penny in his paycheck. And so he was considered unemployed by definition. Those claims gathered dust that we had to sue in federal court in order for the claims to even be processed. So how on earth can workers not be made to feel expendable in this kind of a political economy.
Did you win in that lawsuit?
We won in that lawsuit. We even won at the Department of Labor. When the investigations occur, these companies are found to be the employers that they are, and their misclassification is held accountable. But New York has still not had a proper audit, even though the law judge found them to be an employer.
Badave Desai, you say half my heart is just crushed, the other half is on fire. Talk about the drivers you represent. Where do they come from? Tell us the story of their communities.
Over 90% of the drivers in New York City are immigrants. We have one of the largest Muslim and Sikh workforces in the city, and we're the proud union that went out on strike last year in 2017 against the Muslim ban. We represent workers from over 100
Explain what you did, just for people who aren't familiar, as thousands raced to airports to protest President Trump's Muslim ban.
Yes, on January 28th of last year, we shut down JFK Airport. That while protesters were at the terminals, our members in the middle of this economic turmoil and despair, they took such an act of courage and consciousness, and they refused to leave the lot. They went out on strike in order to give the protesters at the terminals, solidarity and boost.
And what did Uber do?
And Uber told the public that they would lower the rates, basically trying to lure them. And Lyft
at
wasn't
the airports at that moment.
Yes, at the airports at that moment to destroy our strike. Lyft wasn't any better. Lyft is Uber light, and no company in the gig economy is any better.
You mention, and it's been written about, Sonali Kahatkar wrote for Truthdig how the Democratic Party befriended megacorporation Uber for its convention. But the number of people and the high-level Obama officials, for example, people like Plouffe, who I think ultimately has since left Uber.
Yes. There's so many. Every single city and state they go into, first thing they do is hire the former regulators. In New York City, our former TLC chairman went to work for Lyft. His policy director went to work for Uber. It's been a revolving door. And so they are former regulators who know exactly how to destroy regulation and regulatory framework, including regulations that were set in place, ones that our movement for 20 years fought for to protect the workers are now all being destroyed.
So talk about what you see would be fair. The city has been flooded. It started with something like, 19,000 cars?
Yes, today we have over 100.
To begin today for two Baltimore police officers who face racketeering, conspiracy, and robbery charges.
Okay. I don't know if she was finished. Why did it skip? I'm not sure. Oh. Was she finished? I don't know. Oh, let me see here. Nope. Let's see.
Companies are found to be the employers that they are, and their misclassification is held accountable. But New York has still not had a proper audit, even though the law judge found them to be an employer.
Badave Desai, you say half my heart is just crushed, the other half is on fire. Talk about the drivers you represent. Where do they come from? Tell us the story of their communities.
Over 90% of the drivers in New York City are immigrants. We have one of the largest Muslim and Sikh workforces in the city, and we're the proud union that went out on strike last year in 2017 against the Muslim ban. We represent workers from over 100
Explain what you did, just for people who aren't familiar, as thousands raced to airports to protest President Trump's this Muslim ban.
Yes, on January 28th of last year, we shut down JFK Airport. That while protesters were at the terminals, our members in the middle of this economic turmoil and despair, they took such an act of courage and consciousness, and they refused to leave the lot. They went out on strike in order to give the protesters at the terminals, solidarity and boost.
And what did Uber do?
Oh, and Uber told the public that they would lower the rates, basically trying to lure them. And Lyft
at
wasn't
the airports at that moment.
Yes, at the airports at that moment to destroy our strike. Lyft wasn't any better. Lyft is Uber light, and no company in the gig economy is any better.
You mention, and it's been written about, Sonali Kahatkar wrote for Truthdig how the Democratic Party befriended megacorporation Uber for its convention. But the number of people and the high-level Obama officials, for example, people like Plouffe, who I think ultimately has since left Uber.
Yes. There's so many. Every single city and state they go into, first thing they do is hire the former regulators. In New York City, our former TLC chairman went to work for Lyft. His policy director went to work for Uber. It's been a revolving door. And so they are former regulators who know exactly how to destroy regulation and regulatory regulations that were set in place, ones that our movement for 20 years fought for to protect the workers, are now all being destroyed.
So talk about what you see would be fair. The city has been flooded. It started with something like, 19,000 cars?
Yes, today we have over 130,000. There used to be only about 13,000 yellow cabs and another 40,000 liveries and black cars combined. Now you have, over 130,000. Nobody can earn a living.
So what must be done? And you've pointed out this isn't a war between Uber drivers and yellow taxi cab drivers.
That's right. This is really a battle between Wall Street and a workforce that is literally dying to keep its profession alive. It should not. They work so hard. They collectively serve 1 million people every day in the city of New York. They do it with dignity and integrity and with sweat. They should not have to shed their blood on top of it.
What do you think are the 3 most important things that have to happen right now?
There must be a cap on the number of vehicles and done in a way that protects full-time work. The taxi meter, which is regulated, must be the meter that is used across all of the sectors, so Uber and Lyft cannot continue to drop the fare. That rate of fare needs to go up, and there needs to be a health and benefits fund that will take care of the drivers. One of the things that Douglas said was, as he faced his poverty, he also lost his health care. People cannot afford it. There is too much at stake here.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Bedavi Desai is the executive director and co-founder of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, which represents over 19,000.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there because I think she's going to say something else, like another topic or something, but I'm not sure. Okay, so, boy, oh boy, a very, 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 very interesting let's see, article here, issue that's going on. A couple things popped out in my mind. One, I want us all to be safe out there, because sometimes if people can't get to corporate, they'll get to the closest ones to corporate. I'm not trying to make anyone afraid, but I'm just saying, I'm saying this for awareness, and it's also for me as well. Okay? And I do like the idea of having the same price that a taxi will charge, same price for an Uber, because that will help us even get more money. And it does allow people to choose on an even playing field in terms of price. Of course, this day and time, if it's less, people are going to go with the less price. Okay? So that's good in terms of us making more money. She was saying capping the number of cars that are out there based upon the full-time workers. Well, then that's kind of sort of shutting the part-timers out, including myself. I do understand those who are doing Uber and Lyft full-time. My hat goes off to you. And this is what you choose to do full-time. But let's say for someone who does it part-time, that's what they also choose to do it part-time. I think if the money is increased across the board, the full-time workers are making more money and the part-time workers are making more money. And I think that it will balance out. Also, I can't say that he shouldn't have killed himself. I mean, people from different cultures, when things are not up and, you know, wealthy, or everything is not like your family isn't okay, the bills aren't being paid, it's kind of sort of a disgrace. It's kind of sort of make a person feel helpless and degrading, and like he was saying in his post on Facebook, how he's saying he's not gonna work for chump change. It's a new way of slavery. So he to make money was very, 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 very serious and important to him. Not saying that it's not like that for everybody, but there are plenty of people out here who may have lost their job. They didn't kill themselves. They found another way to maintain. Um, there are plenty of people who have gone through a lot of traumatic things in life and they didn't kill themselves. I'm thinking that he felt that this is the only thing that he could do, because he could not survive in the environment that he is kind of sort of saying that the rideshare gigs has built around the taxi drivers. And they were saying like 100,000 of taxi drivers feel the same way he does, well, did, and the other 3 drivers who killed themselves. But it's like, how many lives have to be given up in order for someone to listen? Because it seems to me Uber is still booming as well as Lyft. So it's like, when does it stop? And we all choose to do what we are doing. And a lot of us really love what we're doing. It is, what can I say? I wish that, I wish they wouldn't label Uber and Lyft as and in a blanket kind of way, destroyers of people's livelihood. I like the idea that Uber did start this platform, Uber and Lyft, to the point that there are more people are able to get around. Some people felt taxi driver is too much money, and the cars stunk and so on and so forth. But this particular driver, he was a professional driver, and you saw how he dressed with the black suit and white shirt, and I think that was a Mercedes. So he wasn't just a taxi driver, he was a professional driver. But ever since Uber and Lyft came on board, it has made an impact on the taxi service to the point everybody not happy about it. I don't know how all this is going to end, but I would say, looking at the amount of money that he was making with all those hours he was working, it was giving him a good life. But once those hours were taken, the money wasn't coming. Therefore, that good life became poverty and poor and homeless, based upon what he said in the post. So what I want to say, and what I want us to learn from this is, it's important to monitor what is most important to you in life, to the point, let's say if you don't have a job or you can't work as many hours as you did. What are the things that you cherish here on earth that you will want to keep no matter what? And once you decide what those things are, then you look at your finances, your responsibilities, and set yourself up in such a way that if Uber and Lyft decrease full-time hours, or you can't even get all your part-time hours, can you still maintain? It's going to take some time to think about it and see it and be welcoming to it, to looking at your situation in such a way. Because the reason why I'm saying this is because I do not want another driver, far or near, have suicide as an option. Like that can't be an option. It's like it can't be an option. And that's what I don't want suicide to be an option. That's what I'm saying. I do not want suicide to be an option. So let us manage what we have, spend our money wisely. I'm not saying that he didn't. I'm learning something from the situation. Okay? Some people will work in order to have. But when the work is not there, they don't have. And when they don't have what they had was most important, to the point now they don't